Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Master series, in which I will cover the round number 3 from the Polish First League. I've played a long game, so get ready for a good analysis, and without further ado, let's start with the game. There is no time to waste today. So, I played against a lower rated opponent, and the opponent's team had much better opponents on their starting list, but few of them didn't come here, so that's why I played against opponent lower than 2000 elo, meaning that from the team's perspective I was the one that had the biggest gap relatively in terms of rating, so I had the white pieces, I had to win. That was the game plan for today. Did it work? Let's check it out. So I opened with e4 this time. Yesterday you saw d4 move, now it's e4, because I want to play open game and win as fast as possible. That's the thing. c5 was the answer from the opponent, and now I simply went with knight f3, d4, entering the 4-knight Sicilian that I myself play with black pieces, that I myself played few times already on this channel with white pieces. So I had many openings, many variations to choose from, and I opted for the sharpest one because I felt like my opponent might not be prepared since he was much older. So I went with knight d2 b5 and bishop f4. You may know that from the episode number 1, I believe. So if you watch that, great for you, you know what's going on. The big thing is that I am giving up the e4 pawn, but black has to be really precisely prepared in order to go for such line. My opponent was not such well prepared, and he went with e5, allowing me to play bishop g5. And as you already can tell, eval bar is going up a little bit. I have the pressure here. This is the weakness. This is the weakness in terms of the squares, so plenty of things going on. And a6 already seemed a little bit weak. In my preparations I saw the castling as the main move, after which I would be playing a3, takes, and without this bishop my opponent would have already a few strategical problems, so I was feeling alright. And without castling I felt even better during the game, because of the tactical reasons. After I take on f6, opponent cannot really take back with the queen because of the fork on c7, so he has to take with the pawn. Not only that, I am giving him a check, after which he's not really that keen on taking the knight either, because it would allow me to activate my queen to stop him from castling, to hit all the weaknesses and so on, so I am close to even winning. So for that reason he has to move the king, and after a check to f5 he has to go back. So this is the position from the thumbnail, and you might ask yourself, like, what's going on? It's the move only number 11, the king has already moved here and there, and there are so many pawn weaknesses and square weaknesses, so it should be easily winning, right? So the dynamic is this: even though opponent has so many problems, I also have one problem, which is lack of the activity. I know it may sound strangely like, what are you talking about? You have this amazing knight, this one would like to jump there, and many other pieces can be activated, but I am missing just one tempo. With one tempo more I would be winning in countless ways. However, at that point the point is that my opponent will always have the d5 move, trying to open up the attack to the f5 amazing knight and undermine it, with the hopes also of pushing d4 thanks to the spin. So all in all, d5 move will make this position playable for black, let's say. So I was thinking about how to stop it. Should I play bishop c4? Should I play queen d5? Or maybe I can actually drop back the knight, but I didn't want to do it since it's amazingly placed. Also, I was thinking about some queen h5 moves, and I had some crazy ideas of sacking something on f7 later on and stuff like that, but in the end I decided against all that crazy stuff, because I felt like after bishop c4 I am simply maintaining the strategical advantage, but also I might be just getting a clear pawn advantage. And because the opponent's position is so bad, he actually has to go for such line, and he has to play d5 even though I control it in so many ways. At that point obviously I cannot really take with the pawn because my knight would be hanging and the exchanges would not be favorable for me. Also the knight is pinned here, so I have really an option between taking with the bishop or with a queen, and I decided that I want to take with the queen after I would take with the bishop. I didn't particularly like the queen a5 move, I believe, because there is the pin, there is the pressure, the knight might activate like that. So I was unsure whether or not I will be able to castle calmly and do all other stuff, so I decided that I want to have a clear pawn advantage heading into an endgame, and that's why I played queen d5, and after exchange here and here, and opponent's king e7, I had a critical moment how to approach this endgame. Should I also try to exchange all the minor pieces or not? And I believe that the main two options for me would be to castle long or play maybe some bishop e4 move, but I was really unsure what to think about the position in which my opponent would take me on c3, because I have the pawn advantage, sure, but like this is the pawn, right? Because on the queen side I have 2 against 2, so this is the one additional one, but like how am I going to use it later on, I'm not that sure. So because of that I decided against having the minor pieces on the board, so I took on c6. My opponent took on the c6 too. By the way, he also suggested proposed a draw in here, but obviously still I am a pawn up, so I will be examining my opponent how well does he know the rook endgames, because after king e2 going away from the pin, my opponent kind of has to take on c3, and we got into a position in which my opponent played rook a to b8, and once again I have the critical moment how to approach this position. So as you can tell, I should be winning, right? Computer likes the position, I have a clear pawn up, what can go wrong? Basically the problem is that even though I have this one more pawn, an opponent have quite a few weaknesses. Usually 4 rook endgames are not that easy to convert, because opponent might have many decent options of activating them and creating some problems, one of which was a very good move, I believe the objectively best one, rook h to g8, with the hopes of attacking the g-pawn. Obviously I would play a move like this, but then the rook for example can enter the game through the 4th rank, so it can either go here to attack those pawns or here to attack those pawns. Also rook g5 might be tempting, trying to simply grab this one. Maybe it would be worth it to get the pawn, but at the same time deactivating the rook, it's up to black what to do, but the point is that black has plenty of possibilities, so I have to kind of stop them and then try to win the game with this pawn being one more pawn, so not an easy task. My opponent, as I've shown already, played rook a to b8, and I decided to play rook h to b1. It may seem really odd to you guys, because like why would you ever move the h rook, leaving this one in the corner? Why simply not play rook a to b1? Well, the point is that in some variations, for example, if opponent would like to play rook b5, hoping for an exchange that would be favoring him, then perhaps he can try to leave the rook through the 5th rank, attack here, so having the rook on a1 actually helps me in few variations to cover the pawn. And this is like the main objective, let's say, of that move. So yeah, I chose that one, and after king d6 I had a choice of what to do next, because okay, I am putting up a great fight for the b file, but obviously perhaps I won't be able to grab it for forever for myself. So how to approach this position, because perhaps I will not be able to penetrate opponent's position through the b file, through the d file, because we can imagine that the king will stay at c7 at some point, so like I cannot enter there. So what am I even targeting? So I felt like this weakness, and this amazing 4th rank might be really tempting for me to go there, because I have plenty of weaknesses to target from there. So that was my idea. Therefore I played rook b4, and my opponent replied with a5. And the problem is that, as I've said, those endgames are very detailed and like plenty of things to consider, and I'm not sure if I navigated it properly, because in just few moves I felt like I won't be able to get the advantage. But the point is that I played rook a4, which seems perhaps too passive. I felt like I will have passive rook, but also my opponent will have one, but in the game it didn't really quite work that way, because after rook b5 but that my opponent played c4 rook c5, I was hoping that this rook will have no moves whatsoever. But the problem is that I have to still kind of activate my rook, and I wanted to do it with a tempo. So I wanted to give a check and play rook d3, and from this square I can go either to target this pawn, as I've shown earlier, this pawn, or this pawn. So all the plans are working, not through the 4th rank but rather the 3rd rank, but the idea is very similar. However, as of now I will be facing the move e4, and that's the problem. And also I want to mention that because of that, perhaps at that point I could have played something different than rook d3, but then I was unhappy with the rook g8, rook g4 idea once again, so I don't really know where was my mistake, and I'm not sure if the computer will show it in an understandable way for the human beings, but if you want to check the game out, I will perhaps also do it after the analysis. But yeah, I'm not sure how did I play wrong, but that's chess, I guess. So yeah, rook d3 seemed odd, and after e4 I had a choice to make. How do I want to, as I've said, penetrate the position of the opponent? And I believe the answer to it, objective one, would be to attack the e-pawn actually, so maybe play a move like this. But I really didn't like the fact that after the exchanges I will have still one more pawn, but there is 3 against 3 on this side of the board, there is 3 against 2 on the other side, but those pawns are doubled, right? So I felt like it's too many similarities to fight for a full point, to be honest. Computer likes it for some reason, but I don't know why really. And other than that, I can obviously try to play rook e4 with the same idea, leading to the same variation. Rook a3, rook h3, rook g3, so plenty of options. Since my opponent was in the time trouble, I decided to play rook a3 first, hoping for him to play rook f5, because in that way I would be finally getting some activity. I can now hit the pawns like that, or like that, or like that. So once again I'm using all the corridors that are there for me to attack the pawns, and I would be actually winning quite easily thanks to the weaknesses of the opponent. However, he obviously did not play that. He played king b6, I gave a check, he went back. So once again I gave him the opportunity to blunder, because after king a6, okay, it's not a blunder, but I felt like it might be okay for me, even in this variation that we just were referring to, because the point is that I felt like king here was better, because it can either protect this pawn if needed, or those pawns if needed. So on a6 it seemed odd, I guess. Maybe computer does not agree with me, but that was my thought process anyway. But my opponent was in no mood to any change in the position, so he went with king c7, and I had a choice once again how to play with the rook, and I opted for rook g3, and I was met with h5. Powerful move. My point was that I should be giving away the f5 pawn, but at least I will be getting back one of the f7 or h7 pawns, so I should maintain the pawn advantage. But h5, this is the move I've missed, and the point is that even though I can enter the 7th rank as I was planning to do, the point is that now the rook will protect this pawn, and the other rook will protect this one, in the meantime taking mine. And because of that, I won't be even able to maintain the pawn advantage, and no activity enough to really be better here. So as I've said, from the move around number 20 to 28, which we are now in, I didn't know what I did wrong, to be honest, from the human perspective, and I got equal position. So yeah, I guess rook endgames are quite complicated, but obviously I continued. My idea was to try to get the activity of this rook, which is obviously terrible now, so I played rook a3, kind of inviting opponent to take on c4, because I wanted him to take there, since after such exchange I would be once again getting this activity, maybe grabbing this pawn and this pawn, maybe even this one. So in the variations like this I might be okay. So yeah, I quite like that, and I believe that's the reason why my opponent simply took on f5 as planned before, and I played rook e3 with the hopes of finally maneuvering my king away from this square, because it failed odd in here. Okay, it's protecting the pawn, but I felt like now it's the job for him to protect those, so that the rook can be free to do anything on the king side. So yeah, I played king d2, and after king d6 I played king c5. I felt like my opponent might be heading to c5 square, which would be a mistake, I believe, so I was more than happy to see such maneuver, but obviously I overlooked the opponent's idea, which he was in the time trouble, so I was hoping that he will play badly, but he played amazingly as of now, until now. So he played king e6, trying to help those pawns and perhaps get this rook alive, right? So yeah, that's the case, and I decided to play rook h7, and after rook g8, g3, and the problem is that after opponent's waiting move, I cannot really play anything like forward, because this rook is defending basically everything. I maneuvered my rook from this square to this one, so there is no really other better one. This rook is looking at many weaknesses, but obviously it's not enough. I don't have any pawn pushes, my king cannot help in any way, so like I am kind of lost in terms of how to continue the initiative. I decided to play move like rook h6 with the point that I will be planning on playing f4. Quite a nice move. So let's say opponent did something without any meaning to it. So after f4, our opponent would really have to take the pawn, since going away with the rook does not really work. So after takes, now with the rook on h6, I am actually putting pressure here and here and here. So actually I might be getting like something, because rook g6 is needed, and now I have rook h8, so this rook is misplaced. Mine is better, but still it's all around equality, as you can tell from the computer, but for humans it's, you know, a little bit of initiative at least. However, my opponent played, I believe, precisely rook g2 g5. It may seem that f4 is even more powerful and forcing now, but the point is that after f4 now, at the end of the variation, opponent has rook g2 f5 move, and the problem for me is that if the exchanges will happen, opponent has plenty of weaknesses, but my rook is not on time to attack enough of them to really get the advantage, and if I don't exchange, opponent's rook might be getting too active, so I don't really want to go for such variation. And if that's the case, like, how am I going to even continue, because this is a real threat to my pawn. So even though just before, few moves before, I went with the king there, now I have to just get back. So I started with king d2 move, and my opponent now saw that I am planning to go back, so he decided against playing rook to f5 and chose rook to e6. Very interesting move, because now this rook once again holds everything, and this rook will be holding everything on the 5th rank. However, also it will have the opportunity to perhaps go to c5, attack my pawn, and so on. So good rook placements from my opponent, and as of now I felt like I have to really go for the f4 move, and after takes, rook g2 e5, opponent seems very solid, and even though he has only 2 minutes on the clock, it is only 2 moves to make until time control. So this time, during this round, time control arrived at the wrong moment, I would say. So yeah, that's that, but still I continued, because the team needed me to win, at least I thought so, because on the other boards there was not a clear situation. So I played king d3. After a check, I went to c3, he went back, and now, as I've said, the time control arrived, so additional half an hour for both of us. I started with the move rook h8, trying to finally activate the rook. So we were maneuvering a lot, I was calculating a lot, but none of those variations are that interesting, so I will skip most of them. So I will just try to focus on the game itself, because it's still a long way to go, and I believe that we still have some time to pass by. So yeah, opponent started with rook c5, trying to attack my c4 pawn, so I decided to protect it, giving away the e3 square. So it's a very important decision that I had to make. And after the check, my opponent had a way of going rook a3, after which I was planning on going rook h4, takes, and the idea is that at least something interesting is going on. My opponent has an A passer, which is faster than my H passer. However, I felt like if he, let's say, starts pushing, now my rook is better than his, so maybe my pawn might be faster or something, so at least something is going on, and I felt like I might be having a chance there. So I believe that's why my opponent opted for the other way of dealing with the situation, which is rook c2 e5, with the point that after I play rook h4 anyway, he will try to give me some checks, and in the end try to place the rooks on the second rank. And as we know, both rooks on the second rank, it's quite a powerful weapon. Also, my opponent found a very interesting way of exchanging few more pawns, which is a4. The idea is that obviously he's threatening me with a3, maybe even some checkmate pattern, so I have to react with rook a8. And only now he plays rook f3, and even though he gave me both h pawn and a pawn, the idea is that at this point, after grabbing my c pawn, he actually has the choice of either taking one pawn, which is a pawn, or h pawn. So once again he will be on equal terms in terms of material. However, I felt like my opponent will not want to make any decision, because both this one and this one are passers, meaning that it's very hard to evaluate whether or not it might be enough for me to win the game, or if not win the game, at least create some problems. So my opponent opted for the other route, which is very interesting, and it was unexpected really. So he started checking myself and played king d6, not allowing me to escape through the c5 square. And the point is that even though I have one additional tempo that I used on the rook h6 move, trying to hit the pawn, if my opponent went there, I would try to hit the pawn that way, so the king would be, let's say, overloaded there. But the point is that my opponent now started checking me and checking me and checking me all the time until I went to the g4 square. And the problem is that after a very quiet, calm move rook c2, I am out of moves, basically, because um, moving this rook would mean that I would just lose the idea of attacking the pawn, so not ideal, right? And moving this rook would mean losing either this pawn or this one. This pawn obviously cannot really move if I want to save it. Moving the king, well, I can only go there, there or there, so it's all very bad. So like the only pieces that are free to go is either this pawn or this pawn. So obviously h4 is very tempting because I would like to promote this pawn. However, after rook c3 and then rook g2, and g pawn might be lost, I don't have really a way to save it. And not only that, then my king is not that great either, because I would have to go to h5 perhaps to save myself from the perpetual checks, and it's not ideal to have your king on the edge of the board with both opponents' rooks on the board. So I decided against h4, so I was really close to play a3, because I felt like, okay, I'm in the kind of Zugzwang, so I will play a3 and I will ask my opponent what he wants to do, because he either has to take there or he has to, yeah, I don't know really what to do. And I don't really remember the reason why I didn't play that move. There was something there, but believe me guys, I've played nearly 6 hours, so I might not be remembering everything. I am kind of exhausted as of now, but the point is that, yeah, for some reason I decided against it. And as I've said, those were some deep and boring variations, so you don't need to know them anyway. And I decided to play rook h5 in the end. Yeah, losing the initiative on the f6 pawn, but at least not allowing my opponent to play f5 because I control f5 square. And maybe, just maybe, after the move that I expected, play rook c5. That was my idea that I found after like 15 minutes of thinking, because it's a new situation, new position for the rook, with the hopes of taking the c pawn like that. And obviously after king d6, I will not want to repeat moves three times. So I did that only twice to just check if my opponent wants to play something else, because at that point he was very close to pushing f5. He had his hand over the pawn, and f5 would actually be the bad move, and I would be happy to see that, because such pawn checks does not accomplish much. And the point is that as of now my king became kind of an active piece, and I am hitting all those weaknesses. I might be on the good way to win the game. And for that reason I decided to repeat moves twice in order to see if my opponent at that point would want to play f5. But the point is that as of now he knew that f5 is not working, so he decided to repeat once again. So I had the decision, guys, either to take a draw and claim the team win, because with that draw I was the last one to play, we would win 3.5 to 2.5, or I can try to still win the game, but at the same time I might be risking the team's result, because if I lose it somehow, then it will be 3-3 and my team would be furious at me. However, I felt like I cannot really lose the game in any way, so I decided to still proceed, and I went with rook f5 move, forcing one exchange and giving up the h pawn. For obviously my opponent gave a check in between, and that's the position. So once again we are on the equal terms. However, my advantage is clear. Those are the doubled pawns that I can cover with this one, and this is my last and only hope to do something. So I still continued playing. I decided to play rook a7. My opponent gave a check, which felt a little bit odd, because it allowed me to play king f3 and attack the rook and the pawn. Obviously, before attacking the rook and playing king f3, I knew that it's not really working the way I wished it would work, but the point is that I still maintained some pressure, and I didn't really want to go to the other direction, because then my g-pawn might be lost, and then perhaps the f-pawn could actually start pushing, so I didn't want that. So I played it a little bit safe, let's say, and after king f3 rook c2, I took the pawn with the hopes of maybe my opponent taking either of those, and I would actually claim the pawn advantage finally after taking the f6 pawn. However, my opponent was really precise. He played king e6, and if I went to rook c7, he can repeat the moves, but also after rook c7 he can actually take my pawn, because then he would protect the pawn that way too. So I cannot really play there. I had to play rook a7. So as of now, we both have passers, but I have the more outside one, more advanced one. So still, even though the computer says 0.00 for the like last 30 moves, I am the one that maybe will be able to win this. Will I though? Let's see. My opponent started with the king f5 move, trying to get some space after giving me a check, and he did that, rook a3, but as of now the king is kind of misplaced. In such endgames with the pawn on the edge of the board, you would like to have the king around the g7 h7 squares, because if I push my rook and the pawn until the end, those are the squares for the king. So my opponent acknowledged that fact, and when I started pushing the pawn, he started with c5 though, and after rook a8 he finally recognized that he has to really go with the king to the g7 h7 squares. So he did that. In the meantime, I played also king f2 and only now f7, and the point is that it's a drawish endgame. I knew that. I even knew how my opponent is supposed to be drawing this, and I believe that the easiest way would be to push c4 and then c3, with the idea that as of now the rook is kind of protecting the pawn, and pawn is protecting the rook, so I cannot really go with my king next to the rook, attack the pawn in any way and stuff like that. So my king is useless, my rook is useless, so perhaps the game would finish in a sequence like king d3, king c2, king g7, king h7. That's that. I saw that and I felt like, okay, I gave my best and I drew the game, which would mean that the team has won, so at least that's the good thing about it. So yeah, I was prepared for it. I also saw a win. I believe it was a win. If my opponent decided to go king g7 h7 all the time already here, I felt like I might be having a way of winning this, because if my opponent allowed me to play like this, I felt like I might be going like around the pawn, trying to both hit the rook, hit the pawn, and protect mine. But as you can tell, it's still 0.00. I believe I know the reason, because actually if you remove both of the opponent's pawns, it will still be a theoretical draw. So I knew that also, so I felt like, okay, maybe my opponent knows the rook endgame theory and he will give the pawn away just like that in order to show me who's the boss, that he is able to draw the game without two pawns, but this was not the case. So I believe that from the computer's perspective and from the perspective, mine perspective, of the guy that studied endgames, rook endgames, it's draw still anyway, but I felt like I just might get some initiative, and you know, after 5.5 hours of play, everything is possible. So that was that. However, my opponent started pushing the pawn and I felt like, okay, it's done, I cannot do really much. But after king e2, he now started to play king h7 g7. So I played with my king until this point, right? And he played rook a6 here, 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 and yeah, I told you guys that with the c pawn on c5 I might be having winning chances. With the pawn on c3 I would not be having winning chances, but with the pawn on c4, am I having like those chances or not? So I decided to still take those, meaning that at first I wanted to play like king d5, king e6, maybe f7, I don't know, something like that, but obviously it would not be working. But then I spotted a very nice idea of trying to play king c5, and it's really, really risky. So I really had to calculate everything precisely, because if I would lose such endgame, my team would kill me. So after king c5, obviously the crucial line is the c3, because pawn is just running away, right? So at first I calculated king b5, and the point was that I might be attacking the rook, I might be having the like time to get there and get there. Like it was all like foggy and cloudy, because I was just trying to create some magic out of the thin air basically. but one variation that I wanted to share with you was rook c4, very nicely looking, with the idea that after king c4, c2, I have one more rook, but the pawn is promoting, so I can try trick like this, and if my opponent takes, I promote and then I catch the pawn. But my opponent does not have to take, he can play a move like this, let's say. Oh, there is a checkmate, so where is not checkmate? Here? Okay, now it's 0.0. You see, king f7 is 0.0, king h7 is lost position. Because the point is that whether or not uh, will the opponent be able to deliver a perpetual check. So I started calculating this, and you know, the minutes went by, and I was already in the time trouble, so I decided, okay, I need to find something better. So I found one. I found one idea, which is after king c5, c3, king b6, not b5, because the most important thing as of now for me is to try to protect this pawn, so that the rook can be free and actually hit the pawn. Maybe I can do something there. I saw that my opponent has quite a simple way of drawing this, or no, it was not a simple way. So let's say he now played rook c4 again. And the interesting thing is that after rook g8 takes, queening and so on, and the problem is that this pawn is so advanced and I don't have enough checks to check the rook and take it, that like I perhaps have to play like this, and it's not a winning position. And I saw that, but I felt like, okay, my opponent might be scary to get there, so he would have to find some alternative to the rook c4 move, right? So going backwards, at this point, if not rook c4, maybe he can try to play c2, right? But after c2, I play rook c8, and once again, I'm trying to hit the pawn, I'm trying to promote mine, so maybe it's not that easy for the opponent to continue to deal with. And I felt like some rook move might be incoming. Some rook a1 or rook a2 or rook a3. And I felt like the rook a3 move would be the best one, because it's simply protecting the pawn. So even if I play a move like this, let's say, he can start checking me. And if he does that long enough, I will be either in the corner, and he is happy with that. He can actually just play, maybe even move like, okay, I don't want to be a fool in the rook endgames, but maybe even a move like this, because the king cannot escape, the rook has to stay there, so the pawn is not pushing, so it's a draw. And if I went like that, then perhaps some move like this would work, because even if I go like, I don't know, here, there is rook a3, and if I take his pawn, he takes mine, and so on. So I couldn't really find a way to fit both my king, my rook, and a pawn in such a way on the queen side in order to promote. So I felt like rook a3 would be the most precise here, but it's quite hard, really, psychologically, after such a long game, to play a move like this, because it has to be played with specific idea. If you don't know the idea, then you will not play such move. You will perhaps play rook a1, because on that square the rook is the most active, right? So rook a1, it's still not losing, because after rook c8, once again, very similar idea to the one that we saw before works. So rook b1, if the king goes there, rook a1, so once again, if the king zigzag its way to the corner, it's the same draw basically. If I would try to play like king c7, then after c2, the pawn might actually promote, so it's quite scary to continue like that. But obviously after king d7, once again, rook a1 would be the move, so it does not really matter if the rook is here or there, the same motive draws. But as you can tell, with the rook on a1 and the pawn on c3, exactly at that moment after my rook c8, it might be quite hard to like connect those two pieces, because they are far away from each other. And because of that, or maybe because of 5.5 of hours of playing, or whichever other reason, my opponent finally blundered and played c2 with no real like idea to it. Perhaps I don't know what's that move about, but the point is that I can now simply take the pawn, and my opponent kind of seemed to be thinking that after those checks with rook b1, rook a1, and so on, he might be able to do it endlessly. But obviously at this moment I have simple rook c7 check, and after king g6, king b8, any other check would be covered. I am promoting, I am winning the rook, I am winning the game, guys, and after nearly 6 hours of playing, I won my game. Not only that, my team, which is a newly promoted team to the first league, won its first match ever in the first league. So amazing day for both me individually, the team as a team. So amazing day to be a player of Sparta Białęka. And with that, we won the game 4-2. So our first win. I myself, as you can tell, won quite a grueling match too. So happy with that. I'll take that. And yeah, as you can tell, even though my opponent was lower rated, he played a very good game. I have to give it to him. So very interesting. We also had a chat after the game. So even though he lost in quite a bitter way, let's say, he still maintained the the attitude in order to speak with me about the game. So very nice of my opponent. And yeah, I would like to leave you with that note. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for supporting me through the Facebook page, YouTube channel. Also, in the meantime, let's look at the review. And yeah, thank you once again. I hope that this over half an hour of me talking was not that boring to you, and you are still here with me. As you can tell, accuracies are quite nice because the game was quite long. And once again, in the opening I was nearly winning, then I lost all the momentum, and in the end game I finally got that blunder from the opponent. So yeah, pretty good games from both of us. I am the winner, I am the happiest man now. So thank you all for watching the game, thank you all for all support, and we'll see each other tomorrow for the next game, hopefully with the same attitude, happy and stuff. So thank you all, and we'll see each other. Bye bye.